Hello to all our lovely stitchers and quilters tuning in today. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a little pincushion using my Hugs and Kisses Gluestick Applique technique. So it's a turned edge applique look, but using our applique paper and a glue pen. So it's very simple and easy for everyone to achieve. I'm Helen Stubbings. I'm the designer behind the Hugs and Kisses brand. We've been around since 2001. So we specialise in applique, our way, the Hugs and Kisses way, English paper piecing, also using our applique paper, embroidery and stitchery, and I've designed hundreds and hundreds of different patterns and books and classes and taught all around the world for the past 20 years. It's lovely to share with you all and share some tips and tricks and some skills that you might be able to take and use with your own work. Okay, so as I said, today we're going to be making this little tiny applique pincushion. You don't have to make the pincushion, but we're just going to be going through the process. If you're watching, tune in and leave me a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from, and I'd love to know where in the world you are and you're watching this. If you're not watching it live during this class, then it will be available later on my YouTube channel eventually, and on my Facebook page, so you can always come back and look at it later. And I'd love to know where you're watching from, and if you've got any questions or comments, please leave them for me and I'll check back from time to time and answer your questions. Okay, so as I said, today we're going to be learning the applique technique. If you've bought the kit, then you get this little postcard pattern which has got the photograph and it's got all our templates on the back. But of course this method's going to be able to be used in any project or any time you do applique. If you love this way of doing applique, you can use anyone's pattern or anyone's design or make your own and just adapt it to this technique. I do also have a book, Simply Applique, which takes you step by step through the technique, and that has lots of lovely patterns and quilts in it. And it also has a CD at the back, if you're still able to use a CD, where you can actually find the project you want to make, then find the templates on the CD and print them straight onto your applique paper. So the supplies that we've got ready for today for this method are fairly simple, and a lot of you would have them. If not, obviously they're easily found, and we also have them all available on our websites. So the main product for our version of applique is this applique paper. It is a Hugs and Kisses branded applique paper. We are the only ones that sell this around the world. It's a special paper. It's 50% soluble, 50% non-soluble paper, and it's got a glue coating on one side. So it comes in packs of sheets, letter size sheets, if I can find some here, like this, that will go through your inkjet printer. And if you look carefully up to the light, you can see a shiny side, that's the glue, and that will go onto the back of your fabric. So it's a bit like a freezer paper method if you've done that before, but we don't have to remove the paper. We also need a glue pen. So this is a SEWLINE brand glue pen. It's designed for use on fabric. It has this little about a 1/4 inch wide glue stick in it, which is actually still too wide for my liking, but it's the best way to use. It's designed for fabric and it's water soluble, so it's fabric safe, acid free, and it has just the right amount of stick for the process that we use it. So I do prefer the actual fabric glue pens. You can get them in lots of brands, but if they look the same in the same sort of shape packaging, then they're probably all the same, and the refills will actually fit every brand if you've got the same one. So we need a glue pen. We also need some basting glue. So I like the ROXANN's basting glue, and you can get that in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So the little pack for your purse right up to a refill size, some little dibber-dabbers and plenty in between. So that's our basting glue. You can go without that if you're just doing small projects, but if you're going to do a lot of this, well worth having that, works much better. I also use an applique needle. So these are our Hugs and Kisses applique needles. They come like this. My needles I love because they're nice and short and fine, but not so fine that they bend or go straight through your finger to the bone. But most importantly, they have a long eye, so that makes it much easier to thread. We're also going to be using a ceramic pencil to trace our pattern. You can use whatever you like, just a mechanical lead pencil if you like, but I find a ceramic pencil glides on the paper really nicely and doesn't catch the fabric or the paper. To hand stitch my applique, I'm just using a 60 weight poly thread. This is a superior bottom line thread, so 60 weight poly, nice and fine, nice and strong. I also use it for English paper piecing, which is why I like it nice and strong, because you need strength for that, and I just use the same thread for both. We have these little bobbin tubes which come with all the basic blender colours that I use in all my work, so they're really good, but you can get them in individual bobbins, so just one little bobbin like that, right up to cones and everything in between. So that's the thread I like to use. Okay, I'll mention a few things as I'm going, but they're the basics things that you'll need to have a go and get started. So to start, I've got some applique paper, and I've got my design on here, and I've got my ceramic pencil. So I'm going to trace 6 petals that are on here, and one of each of the centers, and I can just have those all tightly. Just trace as accurately as you can. So I need, if you were doing hundreds of these, you could just write a number each time so you don't lose count. If you're wanting to do this as a make and take class, remember we have kits available, so you can order those and have them sent out, and then you can just come back and watch the class again. Also have a lot more classes on YouTube on the applique method, so all different hints and tips of various aspects of the method. We'll be going through it fairly quickly today. Okay, so there's all my shapes traced. Next I'm going to get some nice scissors. Now I really love the HNK Buckley scissors. They have a serrated edge, so they cut really nicely and drag that fabric in. This is the medium size pair, so the blue handles. They have large soft rubber grips, so they're really easy on your hands, and left or right handed. And you can just, with a nice long blade, work your way around. Now it's important to have nice smooth curves. So these are your templates for your applique. So if your curves are spiky and choppy, then you're not going to get a smooth petal once you put your fabric over the template. So it's not so important to be exactly on the line that you drew, but it is important to cut it out nice and smoothly. And see how I'm actually turning the paper as I close the blade, and that helps you get nice smooth curves. It is easier to cut them apart into manageable sizes before you cut each shape. Now this paper can go through an inkjet printer, so you can print your templates on there. You can photocopy and print them. Don't put it through a laser printer, because the heat of a laser printer will melt the glue on the paper and your printer will be doomed. You can also, as you saw, trace through it. So you can use anyone's pattern and trace through it. You do want it to be reversed. If it's not reversed, then turn it over and trace on the glue side. You can also go through any sort of cutting machine. So if you've got a Sizzix or an AccuCut or any sort of little die cutting machine, then it goes through that really nicely as well, or even a punch. So if you wanted to punch out hexagons and that for your English paper piecing, or perfect circles, you can use it like that as well. Okay, so I'm just quickly cutting all my pieces out. There they all are. Okay, so now I've got all my pieces. Now I'm going to come to the fabric that was in my kit, and I've got 2 pieces of background. That's for my pincushion, and I've got a larger piece for the petals and 2 circles. So I'm going to have that as my petals, that is my big circle, and that is my little circle. So I'm going to turn it over, and I might even fussy cut that one. And you're putting the glue side down onto the wrong side of the fabric, and you need to leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance around each piece. Okay, now I've just got my iron over here to the side. Now this one, I can see the fabric. If I wanted to, I could try and fussy cut, so I could try and put this in the same spot of the fabric each time. However, I may not have enough on this piece of fabric to fussy cut, so I won't worry about that. I'll just line them all up and have my 1/4 inch seam allowance between each one. Remember, glue side onto the fabric, otherwise it's going to stick to your iron. Okay, now I do have my ironing mat to the side, but I'll just flip this over so you can see in camera on my very well worn pressing cut and press. So a dry iron with no steam, because this paper is water soluble, so if we add steam to it, it's going to start to break the paper down and it will soften, and we want it to be as stiff as possible. You can also over iron it and crystallize the glue, and then it won't stick very well. So just enough of a hot dry iron to fuse that glue. It doesn't take much, and then it's fused. Okay, so now we're going to cut out our shapes with that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Don't go too small until you've got the hang of it. You can't add it on once you've cut it off, but you can trim back more. Now it just has to be a rough 1/4 inch. The template's not going to move, so it doesn't matter if it's not exact. Okay, and then we're going to cut out our petals. If you're running really short on fabric and you had to really squeeze it in, then you could go down to maybe 1/8 of an inch, depending on your fabric. If it's a fabric that will fray easily, you'll have to be a little more careful. But if it's a good quality quilting fabric, then you can go a little smaller. And you'll get the hang of how much seam allowance you like to work with the more you do. Okay, and that's our pieces done. So next we now are going to glue our edges over. Now I'm just putting out this little sticky mat here to show you a few different ways. So I do most of mine just with my glue pen and my finger and thumb, and on my lap on the lounge with a good light. But what we want to do is run a line of glue. Now wind it out a little bit because you don't want the full thickness. So if you wind it out a little bit, then you can use the edge of the glue pen. And we want a line of glue on the edge of the paper, no wider than the seam allowance, and then we should never get sticky fingers. Then you use the pad of your thumb to just fold up until you can feel the edge of the paper, and then push it down onto the glue. Now a straight edge is easy, we can just push it straight down. But once we get to a curve, we want to switch just to our thumbnail and do little gathers, a little bit at a time, just pushing into that glue so that we get a nice smooth curve. Now I've just done half of the shape at a time because the glue does dry quite quickly. So push, pinch and gather. Now all the excess fabric doesn't have to be stuck down hard onto the paper. All these gathers are fine if they're just sitting up here. They're going to be behind, but what we want is a nice smooth curve. Now, I call it a pinch and gather. Think of curtains, so the opposite would be a box pleat. Now, if you just did a big push like that, like a box pleat, then you get these points around your curves. And that's not what you want. We want nice smooth curves. So pull it up again. The glue allows you to do that. And just do a little pinch and gather around the curves. And you will get perfectly curved and prepared petals. Now, if you struggle with your thumbs, if you've got arthritis or fumbly thumbs and you just struggle, then there are tools you can use. So these are APLIQUICK tools. They're a lovely little set of rods like this, stainless steel rods, and they look very lovely. They come out of Spain, I think. And there's two in the pack. So you can see this one's got the little forked end, and this one's got a little beveled edge. So the little bevel there. And then on the other end, you've got little points. For most work, you can use just the beveled edge. So what you do is you put your glue on and then use a little fork to hold the paper. It's easier to put your glue pen down. And then the beveled edge, you simply pull the fabric over and onto that glue. Okay, and I'm using this little sticky mat. It's not sticky, but it's grippy, because that grips it and holds it there. And then we need to put a bit more glue. And then we just use that bevel to pull it down. Now, as we come around the corner, you're just pulling a little bit at a time and pushing it onto that glue. Now, the more you do this, the quicker you get at it. As I said, I use my thumb mostly until I get to little fiddly bits, and then you can really work the tiniest little pieces in with these tools. And we're just pushing that onto the glue, and our piece is prepared. So if you struggle with the curves, then you could try a tool such as these, and that's a way. Now, when you're doing really, really fine work, you can actually just use the points, and you can pull in every little piece on the edge and make sure you've got no points. That's when you're doing very, very tiny curves or little tiny points. Okay, so that's the tools. I'll just quickly finish the rest of these, and then we'll go on to the next step. So around the edge of the paper, and fold, pinch and gather around the curves, and down. One more petal. If you're watching this class on Facebook, please follow me, follow my page, or you can find our Stitch with Helen group. Join us there, or you can follow me on Instagram. That's where I share my work each night. You get the most up to date. Or if you're watching it on YouTube, subscribe to that channel down there on the left, and then you will get an alert every time I put something new up for you. So we have several of these little make and take classes where I step you through a project. You can either purchase kits, or you can use everything from your own stash and just make your little project and learn a new technique. I will put links after we've finished for all the things that I've used, if you can't find them in your local store or you don't already have them. We're happy to ship them to you anywhere in the world. And you can see how quick, once you've got the hang of it, you can see how quick that you can prepare all these pieces. Now on a circle, did you notice there when I got to the end, I just couldn't get a nice curve at the end. So I just pulled up a little bit of the beginning and then filled in the final bit there to get a nice curve. And there's my pieces. Okay, my circle's not perfect, but that was my tracing and my cutting. So all my applique pieces are now prepared. The next thing I do is take my background fabric, and I'm probably going to use the grey since I've got pink petals, and I'm going to start to lay out all of my pieces. Now, if you were doing an applique design, you could get your layout sheet or your full-size design and put it on a light box and then put your fabric on top so you can see where it all is, and then you lay it all out. Now on this postcard there's just this little diagram here how it goes. Now can you notice on the end of this template here there was a dash line, and in a lot of my patterns I actually put a slash line across it. That means it's going to sit underneath another piece and that we don't glue those edges over. So you can see on all of my petals, I haven't glued the bottom edge over. It just takes more time, uses more glue, and it will add bulk when we put it underneath another piece. So if it's going to sit under something else, you don't need to glue it over. So I'm just going to eyeball my 6 petals. Evenly on my background. Okay, and then I'm going to sit my center and my center until I'm happy with it. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm just eyeballing it, so it may not be 100% perfect today. And there's my flower. So I've done every layer at once. So the beauty of this method is that you don't have to take the paper out between each layer because it's going to stay in there. So I can layer up a complete block. Even if it had 7 layers, I can layer it all up and glue it all down at once, ready to start stitching. So to glue it down, I now use the ROXANN's basting glue. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, it's cheaper. It lasts a long time, the ROXANN's, and it will save you money in the long run. Secondly, it's actually stronger. So the glue in the glue pens is a temporary glue, and it's great and an instant stick as you're pushing your edges down and they stick straight away. But it is temporary and it's not as strong. So if I was going to glue up a whole quilt like the one behind me, as I'm stitching, pieces are just going to fall off and I'll lose them. Whereas with the ROXANN's glue, we use tiny little dots, and then if you heat set it with an iron, it's really very strong, and you could take a year to stitch them down and they're not going to fall off. So that's the reason I use it. So I've got everything in place now, and I haven't glued. I don't want to take it all away again and then have to put it back together. So I simply hold and tuck my little glue nib underneath and put a few little dots down. See those dots? And then push the fabric down onto it. Now this is a water soluble glue too, so it is fabric friendly, acid free, and when you wash this project it will dissolve, so don't feel that you can't use the glue. I could not survive without glue now. Okay, that's my petals, so now I'm just going to lift that up. Put some dots of glue down, put down my center, same again, some dots of glue and my pink center. Then I would just, as I said, heat set that with an iron. It dries the glue if you're impatient, but I also find it makes it much stronger and that glue will last much more. This little black mat, as you can see, it's ironable and it's also washable. So that's why I'm gluing on it and I'm ironing on it, and I was turning my edges on it because it does it all for me. Okay, and there's my applique block completely ready to stitch. So the next step will be sewing it down. Okay, to sew down our applique pieces, we can do it by hand or we can do it by machine because that paper's staying in there, so it doesn't matter if you stitch it by machine and catch the paper in. But today, for this little project, I'm going to be showing you by hand. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm using an applique needle, so a nice fine needle, and some just very fine blending applique thread, which was the Superior Bottom Line 60 weight poly thread. That's just the brand that I like to use and recommend and we sell. There are a lot of others available, of course. That's what we use. So I've threaded my needle and I've tied a knot. Okay, and now I'm going to start stitching. So we're just using a blind applique stitch. If you do your stitch well, then it doesn't really matter what colour thread you use. I could use a white or a black thread on this, and if my stitch is correct, then you will not see it, or you will barely see it. So we just choose a blending thread, something that will blend with all our colours. I've got a silver grey on here, and that's a great blender. If I really wanted to, I could switch to a light pink or a champagne on these pink petals, but I'm not going to bother. My thread will blend quite nicely. I'm going to start on this circle here, because that then will lock down all my other pieces. Now, when we're stitching one of the top layers, don't think you need to stitch all the way to the back. You just need to stitch to the layer below it. So I've brought my thread up, and I've just caught the edge fold of my applique piece. I'm going to go straight down in the same hole, but underneath that top piece. So I'm just tipping the needle, tucking the tip in underneath the piece, but in the same hole, and then I'm going to move along a little bit and catch the edge fold, and then pull up, straight back down, move along, catch the fold, pull up, straight back down, but just through the background layer, move along. So on the front, I'm just going straight up and straight down, up through 2 layers, back through 1. All the movement of the thread is on the back of the fabric. So on the top, there's just the tiniest little piece of thread where you've come straight up and straight down. And if I give it a little tug, that tiny bit of thread is just going to sink into the weave of that fabric, and you will not see it. And it's just a matter of working your way around and stitching them all down. If you'd like to know more about stitching by machine, check out my other YouTube videos. There's some in there for using the machine method on 2 different Bernina machines, or how to set up your own machine to do all your applique by machine. It will look just as perfect. You will never see the stitches, and everyone will think you're the perfect needle turner with a beautiful turned edge applique finish without any turning with the needle, simply a glue pen. Now, when you've finished your project, if you want to wash and soften that paper, you can do that. Just give it a wash in some warm water, as warm as it will take, or just swish it around, or you can even just soak it. And the stiffeners in the paper will dissolve, and the fibres will just stay in your project like a soft stabilizer. It will just soften over time just by use and the moisture in the air and in your hands as you work it, but to properly dissolve it, then you'll just give your quilt a normal wash, or your project a normal wash. Obviously, if it's a project that can't be washed, it just feels like a soft stabilizer in your project, so it's not offensive just to leave that paper in there. It doesn't sound like crinkly paper or anything. Okay, so I'm going to complete all that stitching, and then I would just simply make up my pincushion if that's what I'm going to make. So I'm just going to right sides together, stitch around the outside edge, leave an opening, turn it through, stuff it, and close your opening, and you'll have this simple little pincushion. I've just tied in the ends to give it a little bit of different a look, just wrapped some thread around it and knotted it off, and you've got a little pincushion there. So I hope you've enjoyed the little make and take, and within probably an hour tops you could make this up and have a go. So order those kits. The links are below if you'd like to order the kits and then watch the make and take class again to finish your project, or jump online to my YouTube channel and subscribe, or find us on Facebook and follow the page there, or of course over on Instagram. For more hints and tips and regular tutorials and updates, you can also join our newsletter over on our website at hugsandkisses.net, and we'd love to see you there. We have lots of things to show you and share with you, and we're just all about sharing the love of stitching. So hope you've enjoyed the day. Don't forget, come back and see me again soon, and check out our next class. Bye for now.